The talk is the OAuth app impersonation talk. So to my right, Pili Hu and Wing Lao will be presenting for you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very glad to be here to present our work on OAuth app impersonation attack. So I'm Pili Hu, and this is Professor Wen Lao. We come from the Chinese University of Hong Kong. So before we talk about the attack in details, I want to first give you a short version of this presentation. Basically, we have some overview of the scenario and what's the problem. So in online social networks, we are all familiar with them. The first participant is the provider, like Facebook or Twitter. So they provide the system, and the users can register on those providers. They can operate various data objects, like posting status or check the friend list of your friends. And there is also another type of entities called app, for example, Candy Crush. They are web apps or mobile apps. Basically, you first need to register a developer account on those providers. Then you can get data access or permissions from the provider or from the user via certain kind of approval process or via some authorization protocols we'll detail later. OAuth is one of them. The important thing for app is that it has app ID and app secret. So app ID is the one identifier for the app, and app secret is something, basically a shared secret between only the provider and the app. Okay, so this is the basic interaction among app, user, and providers. For example, the app will ask the user, okay, let me post the status for you, and the user will go to the provider, tell the provider some information, then say, okay, let this app post something for me. The provider will give the user a certain kind of proof, cryptography proof, that the app has certain kind of permission. So the user gives this proof back to the app. Then the app can do some operations, say post a status, and also give the proof to the provider, by the way. And this proof is called access token in the term of OAuth. Basically, usually it's just a very long string representing the permission. So note that previously it's just a conceptual illustration, but the actual protocol can be more complex than that. The authorization process can be more. And also, ideally, we say that the app has to prove that it has the app secret to provider somehow, or else someone, other people can also do the operation. That's not good. So the key idea of app impersonation attack is as follows. If somehow you can get the access token and use the access token without app secret, then you can operate with the privilege which is loaded with this access token. For example, it can operate something on behalf of the app and the user, say post a status via this app for this user. And also it can sometimes operate on behalf of the app, for example, send something to the app installers. So how is this possible? Actually, it turns out OAuth 2.0 allows user to easily get access token without app secret. This is via something called implicit grant flow. We'll show you the details later. And also, it allows a user to use access token without app secret. This is called something like bearer token. And what's the consequence of it? Usually, it does not matter too much. But in some scenarios, when not all apps are born equal, it can make a difference. For example, different apps may have different access quota, or different apps may have different access permissions. If a user can impersonate some privileged app, this will become worse. So later I will show you some surprisingly thing that the app has some superpower. Okay, so basically that's the short version. At least you know the general flow of the problem and the attack. Okay, so here comes the long version. I'll first introduce the OAuth background in case you don't know it before, and also briefly tell you what are the previous attacks based on misuse. And we'll show you that app impersonation attack is inherently available from OAuth. It is not based on any misuse of provider app. And then we'll give you a case study. One of them is the massive leakage in this case, you can get 100 million user data in less than 1 week, and the cost is very cheap. At last, we will show you some immediate fix and some reflections on this problem. Okay, so here's the background of OAuth. You know that OAuth has some history already, several years. The 1.0 version was proposed very early, and it was obsoleted for a long time. And only a few providers are using it now. OAuth 2.0, it has a formal framework specification and also has some security analysis. And the current landscape is like that. OAuth 2.0 is very widely deployed by providers. However, nearly all providers implement it in different manner. Okay, so first let me show you one working instance of the OAuth authorization. First, you go to some app. For example, this is hyperlink on Facebook. You enter the app, and you click this Connect Facebook Now. Then you are redirected to the provider. Here is Facebook, and you input your user name and password to authenticate. After this one, Facebook will prompt you a long list of permissions here. So you review and confirm. And those permissions are called scope in the OAuth terms. Okay. Then after all of this, provider will return something, a URL code, and it has a parameter with the code equal to something here. And this one will be redirected back to the apps server. So here you see, here is one callback URL, redirect back. And after all of this, the app can proceed further to get the access token and operate on behalf of the user. And here we summarize the previous working example in this flow chart. So from 1 to 3, you already know that the user authorized on the provider returned the code. And after this, there's something happening in the background. That is, the app will use the code together with the app secret we mentioned before to request for access token in this flow. And after that, the app can do some request, say post status. And here, the app will serve parameters plus access token and app secret. This is optional, we'll show you later. And the provider will give some response, say the status posting successful or not, or here's your friend list. Okay. And in the OAuth term, actually app is called client, user is called resource owner, provider is divided into authorization server and resource server. But in our case, since we're talking about online social network, and the provider serve both roles as authorization server and the resource server. So we only use one participant here. And you know, this is the so-called authorization code ground flow. But there exists another thing in OAuth that is called implicit ground flow. Here you can see there is some difference. Instead of returning the code directly, the provider returned the access code to user. And the user passes the access token to application, and the application can operate further on. So the property of implicit ground flow, you already noticed that during this process, no app secret is used. And this flow is originally introduced to ease developers because developers don't want to write cryptography primitives. And also in some scenarios, probably resources is limited, or in some scenarios, for example, like a browser plugin, where your app cannot keep your app secret anyway. But the general advice is please avoid implicit flow whenever you can. Okay, so regardless of which flow you use, in the end of the OAuth flow, you will get access token. And here is the question, how to use the access token, right? Here we only denote by parameters plus access token, but this plus sign means something else. So basically, there are two types of token. So during the request, the access token can be used in a bearer token style. That is to put the access token in the request directly somehow. Or used in MAC token style. That is put the access token together with the parameters and do some signature on the canonical string. Of course, with the app secret. So you see that the flavor of MAC token involves app secret. So this is the preferred use. Okay, so the conclusion from the background of OAuth is that the general advice is please use authorization code ground flow whenever possible, and please use MAC token whenever possible. This is already common knowledge for app developers. Okay, so that's the background. And we know that people have discovered many problems of OAuth, and there are some practical attacks. However, previous attacks are many based-time misuse and other weak parts in provider app. For example, in a session fixation attack, probably the state parameter is not used, or in covert redirect attack, the open redirect exists in provider app. So the general wisdom is that this mechanism is secure if you follow all the guidelines. You provide an app developers all follow some certain kind of guidelines. However, this is not the case because we know that OAuth 2.0 supports something so that it's inherently vulnerable to the app impersonation attack. So here is the overview. First, we show that using forged implicit flow ground attack, we can obtain access token without app secret. And second, we show that using forged variable token attack, we can use the access token without app secret. So what's the implication of without app secret? That means you can actually impersonate some app, right? Okay, so here is the implicit ground flow attack. First, you need to harvest two parameters, that is client ID and read UI. Those are defined in RFC in order to accomplish the authorization flow. But if you put the two flows side by side, you will soon find out the only difference starts from the fourth step. And the step 1, 2, 3 are exactly the same. So what you can do is first normally do the authorization code ground flow, which is supposedly used by the developer. And during this process, you can harvest the two parameters, and you trigger implicit flow with these two parameters. So that's the implicit ground flow. Then what's the forged bearer token attack? You know, bearer token basically means whoever has the token, they have equal privilege. They don't verify anything else. They just look at the token. A token can be served with some parameters. And there is something defined in the OAuth standard. That is the token type. Actually, this is a required thing in standard. However, most providers do not implement token type at all. And most providers do not implement MAC token at all. And there are some few who implement it. However, they do not enforce a type. And for those who implement it, they also do not provide any opt-outs. Say the app developer, probably he is already aware that, okay, I need to use MAC token. I don't use implicit. I don't use the bearer token. However, the provider do not provide opt-outs. So as an attacker, you can obtain a token and use it in bearer token styles. Then that makes the bearer token attack. So next, let me illustrate you how this works in action. Although the description of the details is very long, but doing this, you can see all the attack can be done in 3 steps and just in your browser. So first, you go to an app. You get the normal authorization flow. Here is the code flow. Because I said all the parameters are the same, so you don't need to do anything. You just change the response type from equal code to equal token. Then that's done. Hit your enter. Then you see you get this access token directly because that's the implicit ground flow. So that's really simple. And after getting this access token, you can just request the API endpoint. For example, here I use curl for illustration. But if the endpoint is HTTP GET, you can just do it in your browser very easily. So this thing actually posts something to Facebook, and here it is. And you see, I posted something via hyperlink. But during this process, no app secret of hyperlink is used, so this application is impersonated. Okay, so you know that this attack is possible. And here is the summary. Basically, you go to some authorization code flow, change to token, and use the obtained access token to query the endpoints. Okay, so you know the attack is possible, but is it really a big deal? Right, this is the question, because it looks like posting via some application does not matter too much. However, we find that this really is a big deal on at least one provider. Here we show you one case, that is provider X. It is a Facebook-like online social network, but it's not Facebook, with more than 100 million users, a very big one. And the setup of provider X is like this. So for every user, it has the homepage, has the friend list, and has the status list. Of course, there are more data objects, but for simplicity, we only show the 2. Normally, if you visit a stranger's homepage, that is, you are not friends, then the homepage will act as some gatekeeper. The system will block you at the homepage so that you cannot further access friend list or status list. So this is what you will get from your browser. And this gives the user an impression that, okay, homepage is gatekeeping those data objects behind homepage. However, we find that if you use the API access, actually there are more access points. You can access those objects directly. And also there is another problem on this provider because you recall that during the OAuth, there are some permission, and you get the permission via the scope parameter. However, the scope is EU designed so that they only have one scope called read status. They don't distinguish between read self status, read friend status, or read other status. So what does it mean is after you get read status, you can read everyone's status. So this is some design problem, logical problem in the provider. And combining these facts, you already know that actually you can get arbitrary users data object like this using API call. And we actually reported this to provider and also asked some user. The feedback is very different. The provider say this inconsistency is by design. Actually, they are public. However, users, they all feel surprised to know that. And they are unaware of it because they view homepage as some gatekeeper. They view the friend list and status list as some private data object, but provider view them public data object. Okay, this is supported by some qualitative and quantitative study. Okay, so you know this already results in some leak of private data, but the problem is how fast you can leak it, right? Because normally an app only have 200 queries per hour. This is the rate control, and there are some higher layer level app. They only have 900 queries per hour. So if you do the math, you will find that it takes years to collect the data of the whole social network. So the provider thinks this is no big deal, right? So even if you can get it, it takes years. However, we say that what we're doing today is the app impersonation attack. We can impersonate another app. So if another app has some superpower, then we can do it much faster. And there really exists such a super app. During the investigation, we find that there is one privileged app which has more than 1 million queries per hour. So this is surprisingly large, right? And if you do the math, you only need 100 hours, just several days. And also, the cost is very low because the resource can be well supported by some Amazon instance of this type. So if you check the price table, it's less than $100. So you can get the whole data of one such large social network with such little cost in less than 1 week. So that's what makes it possible. And we also note that the peak rate is actually more than 100 million queries per hour. And we can further develop some model to calculate the capacity of the provider, but I'm not going into details. Basically, you can do some calculation. Okay, so let's recall what factors make this problem. 100 million private user data in 1 week. So first is the OAuth impersonation. Because given this problem, you can impersonate another app. And the second is there exists some privileged app. If all the apps are born equal, then there's no incentive to impersonate others, right? However, since they are not equal, so you have incentive to impersonate others, and it gives you the rate. Third one is the problematic design of the API. Right? For firstly, the scope. You see the read status is equal to read everyone's data basically, and the provider denied that this is some mistake. It says this is by design. And there is even inconsistent access control because providers say public, users say they feel it's private. So that's why the leaked data is sensitive. Okay, and we note that the app impersonation attack is a generic construction. It's an OAuth problem. And with this attack, actually you can do more exploits other than the coding or the social network. For example, on one provider, we can send notifications with embedded URLs to all users of this app. And on some other providers, we can acquire access privileges that are not otherwise available for a normal app. And in some other cases, we can do some app reputation attack, for example, posted by something. And there are more cases. So you can refer to one of the upcoming paper in SMCOSN 14 for some details. So how to fix the problem? Actually, it's very simple. First is you, as a provider, need to provide opt-out and opt-ins for implicit ground flow, and opt-out opt-ins for Berry token type. Second is, as the provider, you really need to review your API. Firstly, the scope design, and then how you control the rate. And you also need to review the privileged apps. And the reflection from this study is that, OAuth has some diverse implementations that differ from specification. And our study reveals a new attacking surface that we call app impersonation. And app impersonation itself is not very serious, but when combined with some specifics of different providers, it may result in some bad consequences. And we also show that, given this problem, actually protecting app is a must in the design of next version of OAuth protocol. Because if you think about why is this possible, the app impersonation, is because the original design of OAuth is to protect users, basically. And also in the world, if app is not differentiated, so there is no incentive to impersonate the app. However, we show that in some part of the world, apps are not born equal, so you have incentive to impersonate them. So in the design of this version, we really need to consider how to protect the app besides user. So basically, that concludes the talk. Thanks for coming. And we have this project page here. We will upload all the slides and white papers that they are updated ones. Thank you. And if you have any questions, we can.
So is there any protection other than to not authorize the use of OAuth?
The question is there any way other than do not authorize to use OAuth? Actually, we don't need to get to that extreme. All you need is to disable some features of OAuth, namely that either you disable bearer token or you disable implicit grant flow. Without either one of them, it will not work.
But as an end user, so not assuming the providers don't do that, how do you protect yourself?
In this particular case, actually, the end user is not the one who are losing. It is the privileged app who are losing. So in that sense.
I have two questions. So the first one is, if we want to use the authentication code flow versus the implicit code flow, there's a refresh token involved, and it means that the access token can be refreshed for a longer time. And I've seen it could be an issue in some cases that the app will be able to have permissions for longer.
Yeah, okay. I think trying to repeat the question, say that usually the developers want to use implicit grant is because they want to renew the token. Is that the question?
No, so I was saying, so you're saying use the authentication code flow, if it's the name, to improve security. And so what I'm saying is with this flow, the app gets a refresh token that is not available in the other flow. And with the refresh token, the app can keep refreshing the access token without asking the user for consent for a longer time. So I think there's advantage and disadvantage of that.
Okay. So the question is, if you use the authorization flow, meaning that then the app will be able to have keep on renewing its access token. The user will lose the control on blocking it down, right?
Actually, I think the refresh token is not implemented on all providers. Only some providers implemented, although it's part of the standard. And for those, I'm aware of several of them, although they return refresh token, but it's of no use. Okay, then back to your question, I think is for sure, when the provider supports refresh token, then the app can keep on refreshing it without the information of users. And I think the only way for user to block the app is to go to a certain kind of control panel. For example, on Facebook, you can find a list of all the apps you installed and revoke the permission there. Then from then on, the app will not operate on your behalf, or it will be able to, like you said, refresh.
Okay.
That may not be the case. Actually, we saw also some provider, they provide you this panel, but when we deactivate it, the app can still access it. But that's a separate story.
Okay. I have a second question, if it's okay. So in terms of preventing this app impersonation, you say you can enable the authorization code flow and also use signed tokens, the MAC tokens. If you don't implement the authorization code flow and you don't use a client secret, does a signed MAC token really help by itself, or do you need also a client secret?
Sorry, I did not follow you.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, maybe we can take it offline.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Hi.
Yes.
So I actually missed most of your talk, but one of the things I think you were discussing is app tokens that you have on the client device. And I think one of the reasons that is that becomes an issue is that programmers are lazy, and the way to solve that is to keep programmers from being lazy. So programmers aren't supposed to actually have the app token on the device. They're supposed to have it on their web service or their OAuth service. They're supposed to have an OAuth service, and the app is supposed to communicate with their OAuth service. So that's why the issue even exists. It's not actually a vulnerability in OAuth. It's just that the programmers are just taking out that step.
So I'm not sure whether I understand, Chris. So what you mean is the main problem is that programs are lazy. They are not using the right way, right?
Right.
So if they use the right way, you think it should be okay.
Right.
Yeah.
If they use it the right way, then this won't actually be an issue because the user won't actually get the application token because the application token will be on the app developer's service, not on the device itself.
Yes, I think that one, actually, I already said that before, is the general understanding is that if the developers use it in the right way, it's secure. Say you use authorization code flow and you use the MAC token, but it's not the case because if the provider does not provide opt-outs, then as an attacker, I can trigger implicit full and bearer token usage. Just like the hyperlink example I showed there. Basically, that app is secure. It itself uses authorization code grant and the MAC token, but however, there is no opt-out, or if there is, but the developer does not select, so I can trick the two weak parts and to accomplish the impersonation attack. Yeah, so basically, I think the problem is not a matter of whether developer use it or not. It's a matter of whether provider support it or not.
Yeah.
And in most cases, providers support it without opt-outs.
Except, I think after we done the study, actually we find out Facebook used to be just like this one, but then I think recently they provide this opt-out option.
Yeah.
But it's kind of quietly.
What I mean is,
we don't know what's the reason behind it.
That sort of conversation isn't actually supposed to happen from the end user's side. It's not supposed to go through the client application. It's supposed to go from service to service. So that the fact that they put that into the application is, I mean, I'd say you can consider that a bug in the application.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? Or
maybe.
You should never actually get that token.
What you mean is...
But as long as you support, in order to get the token, all you need is the service provider support the implicit grant flow. Even your app does not ask for it. As long as the provider do not opt out this option for this particular app, then the attacker can trigger this implicit grant flow.
Yeah, that's true. But what he's saying is that even in the worst case
Actually,
the fact is, it does take place because people write lousy code, but
okay.
you know.
Yeah, I think basically this is showing the working example. You can repeat this offline at home. Basically, you don't have the app secret of this app, and this app it operates normally on its own server, but you can tweak the implicit ground flow and get access token. And here you just use simple script to request the endpoint to post the status, and you can check. Actually, this is available on nearly all apps here.
But maybe we can take it offline.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I would have to go over it. As I said, I wasn't here for part of it, so I'll see if I missed anything.
Okay, thank you. So, okay, so thanks.